Alrighty, guys, welcome back. Today we have Bitcoin, not crypto, otherwise known as Forest Hodl. Looking forward to speaking to you. We've had to reschedule a few times because you got the little bubs. So I really appreciate you coming on, making the effort, and yeah, getting this thing rolling. So just first, introduce yourself. When did you start your channel? When did you start your Bitcoin journey? What was life before Bitcoin? Did you still have the same sort of dreams, aspirations, or has that sort of changed because Bitcoin's allowed you to do things that you didn't know you could do before?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. So I started my channel in August of last year. So it's been about a year now, actually. And I got into Bitcoin. Like, there was a few different times where Bitcoin sort of entered my life, and I kind of thought, "Oh, this is kind of interesting," or whatever. There was 2014. I found an ATM at a restaurant I was at, and I was kind of just messing around with it. Oh, some sort of digital currency, whatever. Ignored it. Didn't have any money back then. I was just basically vagabonding around, traveling, no money, just a teenager at the time. And then, entered back into my life, end of 2017, 2018, ICO craze. Other friends were getting involved, started trading it a little bit, learning more about it, understanding sort of the digital gold, but also just not knowing enough to avoid all the other things out there too. Oh, this is faster. This doesn't use a blockchain. It connects to other transactions, like all the nonsense of the ICO craze and that we're still experiencing. I mean, my channel's called Bitcoin, not crypto, for a reason. It's we're, all of us are still are go through a phase of distraction with all of the things that try to piggyback off of what Bitcoin is. So got interested a little bit then, decided to focus instead on building my business. And then when I came into a little bit of money, trying to protect that money in 21, 22, and then 23 again after I sold my house, really trying to protect my money, investing in stocks, ETFs, REITs, these kind of things, and realizing that we were in an inflationary environment, post lockdowns and all that, realizing prices of everything's going up, housing's going up, asking myself, why is that happening? And then really just looking at what assets do well in an inflationary environment, because I realized that was a constant throughout our entire lives, prices of everything going up. So that is obviously the environment we live in. What does well? What can you hold to protect yourself against that? And it led me down the scarce asset sort of rabbit hole, which led to Bitcoin. And once I understood the 21 cap, the cost of production, the supply issuance, the difficulty adjustment, these aspects, um, being much stronger than anything else out there. Bitcoin being the hardest money, and it's hard to produce, it's hard to create more of. That's what makes it hard. And when something is desirable and scarce, it is valuable. So, we've seen that with Bitcoin being desirable and scarce. The value has gone up over time. So, everything that I owned just started migrating over to Bitcoin. And I dove deeper and deeper into what it was. And I think your question was really interesting there about, like, how has it changed me, or what was my life like before? Because I think my life was fairly nihilistic in a lot of ways, where I kind of I say that, I had taken the black pill quite a lot, in a lot of things, thinking that, life is just going to get harder. There's not really very much hope. I always wanted to have a family, I've wanted lots of things in my life, and really having to compromise, because it was unaffordable, it was unattainable. It seemed like it was not a good idea because the future was so uncertain. And all of that can just be narrowed down to really the aspect of having a family, but there was other things too: traveling, owning homes, all sorts of stuff. And Bitcoin really just rephrased the possibility of a bright future, where I could see being able to work today, store that work in something that does not leak the energy and effort that it stores, and being able to transport that through time and reactivate it into time, or into energy, um, that can create something in the present or into the future. Um, it's an efficient battery, it's a store of value, and because of that, it gives me hope for the future, and it's a huge part of why I started a family, Bitcoin. I probably would have done it, without it, but I definitely would have felt a lot more pessimistic about it, and probably a lot more stressed and worried about, am I going to be able to afford the education that I want for my kid, the lifestyle, whatever it is. Now I don't have those worries because I have Bitcoin.
Yeah, man, it's an awesome journey, and it's pretty cool how Bitcoin can even impact those things when it comes to having kids, settling down, buying a house, sort of just having that security. Because without it, you're really in no man's land. It's like, how does my future look? I have no idea. Let's just see what happens. I'll just keep working. I'll keep working, try and save. And for me, it's the Aussie dollar. For you, it's the Canadian dollar. And it's like, no wonder we're constantly looking for somewhere to put our money because we start to learn how bad the money is. Um, and I feel like Bitcoin really goes back to the basics as a store of value because everything else is just constant speculation, constant investment. And I love when people say, oh, I went from doing a full time job, whether it's a doctor or whether it's someone doing literally cutting lawns like me, to having to get home after my full time job, go online and figure out where to put my money. It's like, how have we got to the point where you know how bad it is? So as soon as you get home, you're almost thinking, where do I put my payslip? Where do I put my payslip? Because if you're not doing that and you're just saving, then unfortunately you're just getting robbed constantly. So you sort of have to do it. Um, and what I found with Bitcoin is like it's allowed me to sort of ignore everything around me that's constantly trying to take my money in some sense. Like, nah, come to me, the S&P, come to me, gold, come to me, this. And another one is like, oh, save as much Aussie dollars and buy a house as soon as you can. Like that's another voice I'm constantly hearing as a young person. And it's just like, trust me, that's the strategy. It worked for us, 30 years ago. You do it now. Like get a house as soon as you can. Like, the price will continue to rise and you'll be able to sell it off for more later and all these things. Um, and I feel pretty lucky, like when I talk to a lot of people and I feel like I didn't even have a chance to sort of take the quote unquote black pill because I found Bitcoin early. So like I just feel really lucky in that sense. I don't think Bitcoiners are lucky for investing and buying Bitcoin and holding through the dips and things, but I think it's very lucky to be alive right now and realizing it earlier rather than later. And I didn't even get a chance to really have that really, fear for the future because I didn't even know what that could look like because I was instantly, all right, what's crypto? What's Bitcoin? All right, I'm going to store my value here. And that was basically pretty soon straight after school. And it's funny because the school never ever warns you about, the big bad world. And they sort of talk about you got to, have relationships with people outside and build networks and things. And they really encourage, like start to socialize at uni or college or whatever and that's the real world. But it's like they didn't tell us how broken the money was and they didn't tell us about how much they print and they didn't tell us about you're going to have to speculate on everything. Nothing's certain, nothing's predictable. Everything's just like they could print this much this year. And so I just feel really bad for the young people now coming out of school because it's like they didn't know about this in the first place. Like their parents didn't even understand inflation and they've just lived their whole life knowing prices go up and that's just how it is. And maybe buy a house because they go up a lot more than other things. So I love the whole idea that it is going back to the basics. But I did want to touch on for the next question, just separating Bitcoin from crypto. And I know this is something that you've gone into multiple times, but I think it's really important because I'm constantly talking to people that are holding altcoins and I'm just trying to tell them like, hey, as long as you understand what you're doing is an absolute moonshot gamble and you understand that your money could be gone tomorrow, whereas what I'm doing is trying to do a store of value long term, and we can agree on that, it's fine. But it's just so frustrating when they come with me, oh, I'm investing in this DeFi token that's doing this. Like, it has data, it's a governance token, it's this, it's that. And it's like, they actually have no idea what they're even saying and they're just buying it on a hope and a run. And maybe like, is there coins with utility? Is there a bag that you should be having in crypto? Or are you at the point where it's just like Bitcoin only or Bitcoin companies only as well? So could you sort of go into like maybe sort of how you structure your portfolio, not specific numbers, but what does that look like for you in your conviction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's something that everybody needs to wrestle with as they get into this, because it's again very captivating. All these narratives around these other tokens and stuff, but it sort of relates back to what you were talking about, where there's all these things that you could invest your money in, right? S&P, housing, all this stuff. It requires speculation, just as you said. You should focus on your landscaping job. You shouldn't have to come home and also be a financial analyst and have to analyze the earnings reports of Palantir and figuring out even what Palantir does or what Google is doing, or is it a dying business or growing business? Why do you as an individual have to figure that out? And that kind of goes back, or that translates over to crypto as well. The narrative of Bitcoin is very simple. Bitcoin, the protocol, is really really basic. It's incredibly simple, it's incredibly secure, and it's a triple accounting ledger. So I run a node. If you ran a node, I'm not sure if you do, but there's thousands of nodes around the world, and we all agree on the current state of the ledger, which is the blockchain. And so when you hold something on that ledger, this unit that we call Bitcoin, or Satoshis, we all agree who owns what. And the private key that connects to your public wallet address, that is the ownership. That is the ability to move this asset around. And because there's so much cost to the production of it, because it's so decentralized, we have ascribed value to it. And it works on all of the key metrics of money. You can transport it. You can have final settlement that people cannot take it from you. There is no central body that controls it. So there's all of these metrics of what makes good money, and Bitcoin, it just blows that away. And so when people are investing in Bitcoin, a lot of times they're thinking about it as an investment, but you don't get a paycheck and it's in Aussie dollars or Canadian dollars, and you don't think about those dollars as investments. That's just money to you, right? That's just currency. And what it is those are just inferior types of money. And Bitcoin is a superior type of money. It's one that doesn't lose value. It's one that gains value while it's in the adoption cycle, and retains value as the world becomes technologically superior and things go down in price based on technological improvements. This is sort of the thesis of The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. So at least it will continue to gain purchasing power at the rate of the improvements and cost reduction of everything around the world, at least. But right now we're in the adoption cycle. It's people are calling it a store of value. We're still at the collectible stage. There's very few people that have actually adopted Bitcoin. So if you think about Bitcoin as money, and then you think about S&P, Google, whatever, all of these as investments, you have to think about crypto in the same realm as all of those the financial products that you could invest in. These are investments, and I would say highly speculative investments. And you need to realize what you're investing in. Like, it makes sense to have that you're holding a unit of value on a ledger. Does it make sense to hold a token that allows you to create a smart contract, or to have a lending agreement, or to have some sort of government governance and ability to vote on something? Does it make sense that that is something that is worth anything into the future? And I would say probably not. I would say that 99.9% of crypto is going to zero, especially priced in Bitcoin, but potentially priced in even fiat. And you can look at any chart. If you go to TradingView and you price any of your favorite crypto in Bitcoin, it's trending to zero in Bitcoin terms. And again, it kind of goes back to, you're not a financial expert. You shouldn't have to be. You're not a crypto expert. You shouldn't have to be. And you don't know the ins and outs of token unlocks and pre-mines and what the world will actually demand from an alternate blockchain, if anything at all. It's just a load of nonsense that people use primarily for speculation. And the thing is too is crypto will trend with Bitcoin, right? So there's sort of this correlation that is, in my mind, completely unfounded. So if Bitcoin moves up in price, the the other cryptocurrencies out there will move up in relation to it. Maybe they'll outperform in short periods of time. They'll also move down when Bitcoin moves down. There's no direct connection between these things and Bitcoin, and yet they'll move similarly because people associate them, or they're trading between them. They're using trading pairs, but there's nothing that actually directly connects them to that. And I think that's why they bleed out to Bitcoin, is because over time, more and more people recognize and realize that. And a lot of the people that are investing in crypto, they understand that the innovation is in Bitcoin. They think that they can hop on a faster horse for some period of time and outperform Bitcoin and then put those profits into Bitcoin. That's the main use case of crypto in my mind, is trying to outperform Bitcoin. And that isn't a long-term use case. That's a temporary trading speculative use case. And if you're not the best trader out there, you're going to make a mistake, and you're going to end up with less sats than you started with, if you're trying to use it for the only provable use case of crypto at this point, which is, besides stable coins, maybe, is trading. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that answers your question, but for the vast majority of people, you should avoid all that stuff. Personally, I hold Bitcoin in cold storage. I have some registered accounts that I hold Bitcoin treasury companies in. I'm happy to talk about those as well. I do in-depth research, as my audience wants to see that, so that's what I do. But I only hold those in registered accounts, where my only other option would be Bitcoin ETFs or TradFi investments, which I'm not interested in. So I hold some Bitcoin treasury companies, and then anything extra that I make, if I have additional income every month, I'll put that into cold storage Bitcoin. I don't put that into Bitcoin treasury companies even, because Bitcoin is the innovation. Bitcoin is what all of those companies are trying to acquire. Maybe they'll be able to be a company and acquire those assets over time, but you're losing one of the main values about Bitcoin by holding a proxy of a Bitcoin or a derivative of Bitcoin. You're losing the self custody aspect of Bitcoin. So I highly value that, and that's why anything extra I'll just put in directly into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about altcoins for too long, but something that I see trending at the moment is this whole Casper network, Casper token. That's something that's really come up, that I've noticed in my comments, that I've noticed on YouTube. And I listened to Rajat's debate with whoever that bloke was. But if I was to play devil's advocate and they say Casper is going to be like silver to gold, like silver to Bitcoin, and there's a universe where they both exist, and like Casper's got faster transaction speed on layer one compared to Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin has to use a layer two, so therefore it's not benefiting layer one itself. Could you maybe just go and just quickly, I don't want to touch on it for too long, but could you just maybe explain why Bitcoin is superior to Casper, not just in the short term, but in the long term, and then maybe touch on XRP as well? Because I feel like I've watched a bunch of your videos on XRP. You're probably sick of it, but I feel like you can knock this on the head better than I can to a degree. And then I want to move on to MSTR and a few other of those treasury companies, because I'm very interested in those as well.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So yeah, we'll start with Caspa. The proponents that talk about Caspa, they'll say that they've solved the trilemma, which is scalability, security, and decentralization, and they really haven't. There's massive trade-offs. The only way Caspa works and is able to do things fast on a layer one while still allowing people to run what they call a full node is by pruning. And you can run a pruned node on Bitcoin. The reason you wouldn't is because you can run a full node and you can validate all the transactions. You can see which transaction came from where, and you can have full transparent proof of the blockchain. If you run a pruned node, you open yourself up to additional trust, of needing to trust who you're validating the initial pruned node off of, and you're allowing for potentially archival nodes to have hidden transactions or to have, be malicious. And you're not able to prove them wrong because they have the archival information. And there's no incentive for them to run an archival node. The only incentive to run an archival node with Caspa is that for experimenting, basically, for like a, like an academic type sense, or because you're malicious. They'll hate to hear that, but that's kind of the truth. Um, so, it's all about incentives, right? So the with cryptocurrency, you can look at the technology. You can think about, okay, well, this technology is better in this way or this and that. But really, the social layer is so important with these, the community aspect of things and what the community values. So the community of Bitcoin values being able to run your own node. We had this exercise during the block size wars where there was a faction of Bitcoiners who said, it's not important to run your own node. Data centers can run nodes. We need bigger blocks so that we can use this as a peer-to-peer digital currency. That is what we value more of. We want to be able to use it on the base layer for transacting. And then since then, those cryptos that forked off, they also added smart contract capability. They added all this other stuff in there because they had massive empty blocks. They had the ability to have more throughput, more data, and they didn't care about how much data it took because running a node was not part of the community ethos. Whereas with Bitcoin, that is, right. We want to be able to validate our own transactions on layer one. Scaling can happen in layers just as the scaling of the internet protocol, TCP, has basically developed in layers as well, so sort of back to Caspa, right? They have so much throughput. They do 10 blocks per second. These blocks are empty except for the initial transaction that comes out of them, the vast majority of them. They're opening themselves up to smart contracts. They have meme coins, like the UTXO style meme coin ability to operate on there. They want as much transactions as possible because they are going to run into the security budget problem that they like to FUD about Bitcoin way faster than anybody else because of their emission schedule. And you can already see that. You can see, if you look at the hash rate of Caspa network, it looks atrocious. It has never looked like that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has had a dip a couple times, and one of them was from basically the banning of Bitcoin mining in China. And then it was, so the time frame, though, it dipped significantly, but then it rebounded really quickly. The dip in hash rate that protects the Caspa network has been prolonged. It is a very long period of slowly declining hash rate. And the reason for that is because of the emission schedule, and because they claim, oh, we'll have fees kick in and support the network, but they need use case for fees. And they have very little amount of time to make that happen. So, and it takes generations and generations to adopt these things, right? It takes a long time to adopt these. I think the last block subsidy for Bitcoin is like 2138 or something. So we have a long time to adopt and create use cases for Bitcoin that will facilitate the miner fees. And people say, okay, well, the layer twos of Bitcoin don't support it, but they do. This is coming from somebody who's opened up and closed multiple Lightning channels. These are things you have to navigate, and that happens on layer one. And to scale up to everybody using something, there needs to be all sorts of layer two solutions. Because it can't all happen on layer one. Nobody's claiming that about Bitcoin. The transaction throughput will not support the entire world on layer one. So different layers with different trade-offs will have to happen, but it's all being settled on the most secure network. And this idea of a silver to Bitcoin, right? So you could use Caspa or Litecoin or whatever the other ones that will claim to be the silver to Bitcoin in the past or in the future. There's no ability, like there needs to be such rapid adoption of something to be used as a medium of exchange, because a medium of exchange needs to be the most saleable good. It needs to be something that everybody can buy and sell with very little slippage. Caspa will not become that. Even if you can use it quickly on the layer one, it will not become that because it faces so many other massive problems that it won't overcome. And people will continue using the medium of exchange, the most saleable good in their jurisdiction, which is fiat currency, until that fails. And Caspa is not going to step in and replace that. It will be Bitcoin on additional layers. And so there's an opportunity for something like Caspa to be like this intermediary in a small space of time can actually do something that's useful instead of using fiat, right? But that's not even what they're trying to do. They're trying to make, they're trying to basically like replace Bitcoin and be Bitcoin 2.0 and better than Bitcoin, more scalable, all this stuff, and that's just not going to happen. It's just there's a moment of time where they could be the bridge between people getting onto Bitcoin, being the silver, being the more transactable layer one, but there's just no need at this point. Like Lightning works so sufficiently, it's totally fine. People that FUD Lightning have no idea how it works. It works amazingly. And then, moving on to XRP is the exact opposite of what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a completely decentralized ledger that allows anybody to use it. It has no pre-mine. XRP has all the coins have been pre-mined. It's a completely centralized ledger. It can be, censored, controlled. The consensus makes it so that there's no cost of, consensus or production. I mean, it's already been all produced. Essentially, in my opinion, what Ripple did with XRP is they created a prototype, almost like when somebody builds a car, they build the first car as like a proof of concept or a product, right? They've created this proof of concept of a central bank digital currency or a completely controlled currency that runs on a digital layer. And they said, hey, we can consult with central banks around the world, different governments. We can offer that as a service, as Ripple Labs, as the company, and we can fund our business ventures with this proof of concept that will sell to the public as if it's a finished product, as if it's anything of value at all. We can use that as startup capital to fund our startup, which is a consulting business for controlled digital currencies. That's my opinion on XRP. XRP is the most transparent scam in cryptocurrency. A lot of the reason that people get into it is nominal bias. They think, oh, it's so cheap. It's $3. If it goes to 10, I'll make this amount of money. If Bitcoin goes, even if it doubles, it's only, even if it goes to 200,000, I'm only doubling my money, but I could triple it or quadruple it if XRP only goes to $10. These people have no idea what market cap is. They have no idea what XRP even is, any demand for it, all of the nonsense of replacing Swift. I mean, replacing Swift. Swift is a fiat system. Why do you want to participate in cryptocurrency that is just trying to be an intermediary layer for bank to bank transfers? That's not what that's the exact again, that's the exact opposite of what Bitcoin was. Bitcoin is so that me and you can transact, we can hold it as a store of value, it'll go up in value, and no one can create more of it, nobody can control it, and anyone can use it. That's what Bitcoin is.
Yeah, I fully agree that Casper's not going to be a store of value long term. It's just going to be maybe a temporary utility. And then I also agree, XRP is so close to a CBDC that it's crazy. Like it's extremely centralized. It's like you're never going to be able to hold a significant percentage of the supply because it's all just like locked up on their end. Just like, yeah, buy into me. And then when you buy into me, I'm just selling you off for funding. And it's like, I don't know, the whole XRP, XRP has no argument. Whereas like for the Casper, I kind of listen to it out of interest, not to ever buy, but it kind of interests me how it works. But XRP, man, that's just blatantly a scam. Like I just can't believe people would buy that sort of thing. Um, Moving on to sort of the Bitcoin treasury companies, what first caught your eye when it came to MSTR? What do you think they were initially trying to accomplish? Maybe just briefly share their story on how they started buying Bitcoin, because it was pretty significant at that time to make that complete pivot and really sort of pave the way for other companies to do the same. And then what are some other I wouldn't say gems, but what are some other companies that are coming through that you've got your eye on that you think are worth having a look? And maybe some products that you find quite interesting that maybe we didn't see until Bitcoin was a part of this picture.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about MSTR and the Bitcoin Treasury space, I think a lot of the strategy that they're doing right now is this sort of temporary arbitrage that can happen with basically taking on fiat denominated debt and acquiring an asset like Bitcoin. I think this is, again, something temporary where eventually every company will be a Bitcoin treasury company, because they're just sweeping their cash flows and whatever doesn't go into operations into Bitcoin. And then you're just taking that same thesis that people have today when they invest. They say, well, I could hold cash in my bank account, or I can hold an investment and potentially have a return on my cash. That's the same thesis and same concept with Bitcoin treasury companies. I can hold Bitcoin, or I can hold a Bitcoin that is actively acquiring Bitcoin and will allow me more exposure to Bitcoin through their business activities. And their business activities currently are largely just, again, debt arbitrage in some way. So, what initially drove me to be interested in strategy was, Michael Saylor was a part of my orange pilling, actually, listening to the Saylor series. Unfortunately, I didn't buy MSTR when I first listened to that. I did buy some Bitcoin, but MSTR was just completely undervalued at the point of when I listened to that. But I started buying MSTR in September, October of last year, and looking deeper into it, diving into some of the analysis that was coming out, beginning to understand what convertible bonds were and how advantageous they could be, how they could get such low rates. I mean, to me, it was just like intellectually interesting to think of, okay, what is going on here? Like, what is this company doing? How can they acquire so much Bitcoin? I mean, today they have 630 something thousand Bitcoin on their balance sheet. It's just insane. And they're issuing preferreds, and each one of these instruments is more interesting than the last. To me, a lot of my interest is just uh, that it's just intellectually stimulating and very interesting to figure out what's going on with the crossover of the financial markets and Bitcoin. Um, I do think, again, that Bitcoin and cold storage has more value than any of these companies, for the fundamental principle of being able to actually own something. Where I think there's a big scale of how much you can own something, and I think Bitcoin is at the most ownership, for an individual on that scale. Even when you own property, you're still paying taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, that property is being taken away from you. With Bitcoin, there's no such thing. With gold, you can own gold, but somebody can more easily take it from you. So that means that the ownership, again, is lower on the scale. You can secure Bitcoin in such a way that it's next to impossible for somebody to take it from you, which means that it's, very far on that scale of being able to own it. So MSTR is the same as any other stock in that way, right? You have it in a brokerage, the brokerage owns it. You're subjected to the accounts. You're subjected to, you're never going to be able to take self custody of those shares, really, not realistically. And even if you did, it's still, the Bitcoin is being held by Strategy, and they're not even holding it. Coinbase and Fidelity and their other, custodians will own it and all that, right? So there's just all these layers, of risk as well. And the other thing too is there's operational risk with any one of these Bitcoin treasury companies. So there's MSTR has decoupled from the sort of 2x beta that it had on Bitcoin, right? A lot of people were holding this because they're like, Bitcoin trades at this, and then MSTR is going to double it, right? Like, that's sort of the real, ADIQ take on Strategy, was that it was just going to double Bitcoin's performance, and it hasn't done that lately. Largely because it also 4x'd it at one point, right? So then there was sort of a reversion to, or a cool down of MSTR comparative to the cool down of Bitcoin. So consolidating, trading sideways, trading down until it reaches its sort of fair value within the market. It's also a security that can be maybe more manipulated. Like there's more market makers able to short it and put press out against it. It's very hard to really affect a $2 trillion market like Bitcoin. Whereas you can much more easily affect a $100 billion company like Strategy, and even more so these much smaller companies as well that are out there. So all this to be said, MSTR, I'm bullish on it in my registered accounts. I think it can outperform because of their ability to acquire Bitcoin using cheap debt over time and to acquire more and more Bitcoin over time as they scale up. And they're in their, and I believe they're in their accumulation phase, as all of these Bitcoin treasury companies are. There's very few of them that actually use their Bitcoin for anything. And the way they use their Bitcoin is really not that advantageous to their strategy. Like there's a company in Canada that they use like 23 of their like 180 Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and earn some routing fees. There's Marathon, which is a mining company, but they also lend out some of their Bitcoin, which again, just these ways of earning on your Bitcoin is not great. So what Strategy has done is they've sort of wrapped up unofficially, unsecured, so that there's no ability to margin them. They've sort of wrapped up their Bitcoin exposure in financial products, and they're selling those financial products in the shape of convertibles and in the shape of preferred debt, which I find compelling. Of course, there's additional risk. There's all sorts of risk with this stuff. So I would just say that so that people, don't rush into thinking that MSTR is somehow better than Bitcoin. I think there's additional risk and potentially, hopefully, additional return based on the additional risk you take. That's always going to be how you should measure what you invest in. If there's additional risk, there should be additional reward. You should not be taking additional risk for no reason. And that is possible with the other Bitcoin treasury companies out there, right? If you're investing in these small cap ones, you're taking on way more additional risk and potentially not having the additional reward. Possibly. So I don't really find any of the other ones compelling. I mean, maybe I'll throw a little tip of the hat to old Metaplanet. I think their jurisdiction they're in is unique. I think their first mover advantage in that space is unique. There's tax advantage reasons for the Japanese public to invest in them. They are now offering some preferred instruments that are, going to probably be very popular in Japan because they're so yield starved. And they've been able to execute really well, and they can do cash secured puts to generate income off of their Bitcoin strategy, which is an options trading strategy to acquire cash to maybe fund the preferreds or to acquire more Bitcoin. And they can do that in Japan without being registered as like an investment company. Whereas if Strategy did that, they would have to re-register and it would change everything that they're doing. So I think Japan is unique in that space, or sorry, I think Metaplanet is unique in that space. And those are the only two that I find compelling at all in Bitcoin treasury companies at this point.
Yeah, I almost get more bullish on MicroStrategy when I see there's like drama in the news, people essentially trying to take him down, and it's like that will have to all play out whether he's been, I guess, good or bad when it comes to storing his Bitcoin. Like, is it all there? Is it paper Bitcoin? All these things that you hear, but I think there is a percentage of everyone's portfolio that it's okay to allocate to some risk. And you sort of have to choose, do you want to do that in XRP and Caspar and altcoins for your risk to try and, earn a bit more than Bitcoin? Or is it MSTR that you have a look at and go, hey, yes, it's still in the old system. Yes, it's all KYC'd. It's this, it's that. But what he's doing here is really interesting. Do I want to be a part of it and see where it goes? I just think everyone needs to be aware that you treat that as a speculation and as a gamble. But it is something I think worth looking into. And another one I wanted to ask you about is Jack Moller's 21 Capital. So I'm not sure, I haven't really followed it too much, but I always listen to Jack Moller's show that he does like once a week. He briefly talks about it, but I think he's in as much of like a sort of gray area as the rest of us. And that's just because I think he's waiting on some approvals to officially to merge companies. Could you maybe just go into, I don't know if you know much about that, but do you think that's something worth looking into? Is it something that's like just wait until things have been confirmed? Like, obviously non-financial advice, but I'm just interested to hear your thoughts because I think you've got a bit more of an eye for these sort of things.
Yeah, and I wanted to add one other thing to sort of reframe Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury companies. I think Bitcoin is an asset that you can hold for 1,000 years. So you can look at that time horizon. I think MSTR is an asset that you could hold for 100 years. Now, 100 years is a very long time, right? Like it's longer than we're going to live, but 1,000 years is something that's going to pass down through generation and generation. Like if you look at the companies from the 1920s, right? How many of them survived to be 100 years old today? Very, very few of them. Will Apple, right? Apple is this massive company. Will Apple be around in 100 years? I don't know. I don't know. Something else might come up. I mean, maybe the form factor of using a phone won't be what we do, and Apple won't have adjusted enough, and some other company will just completely eat its lunch, right? So that's another way to look at it. I think MSTR is a very good long term investment, but Bitcoin is a much longer term investment. So that's one way I would look at that. And then when you're looking at that, I mean, 100 years and 1,000 years, those are extremely long time horizons. So what happens in the day to day, MSTR has gone down. Josh Man is freaking out on Twitter. There's slight adjustments, all this kind of stuff. None of that should matter to you if you have 100-year time horizon, or if you hold Bitcoin 1,000-year time horizon. So that's another thing you should think about there. As far as 21 Capital and CEP, they're sort of doing they're doing a SPAC right now. They've allocated all the Bitcoin that they're going to start with as far as a company, and they've acquired that by partnering with Tether and SoftBank. I think Jack is really trying to play up the connection and the profitability of both his company Strike and Tether to say, hey, we know what we're doing in this space. We're going to be so profitable. We're going to be so great. I think it's really hard to start a company and be really profitable off the get, right? Like they're starting with a whole bunch of Bitcoin, but are they going to go down the convertible debt route? And another previous interview, I've heard him talk about the first product that they have as soon as the SPAC goes through is their equity. So are they just going to smash their equity, dilute it like crazy, all the way down to one MNAV, just to buy a bunch of Bitcoin? What's that going to look like to the shareholders? Is that really a long-term play? I think so. I think the other thing too is like MSTR is still trading at a premium. There's these other Bitcoin treasury companies that are still trading at a premium. I think all MNAVs are going to compress. I think that they definitely never deserve to be one unless they're a company that's failing. The market can be rational and they can price it at one MNAV, but I think they'll always have a premium. But how much of a premium, right? And I generally mean they'll have a premium at all times. And again, the market could, a bear market, they could say, "Oh, these things are going to fail. We're going to go below." Some of them won't fail, and they'll have deserved a premium on their Bitcoin holdings. But I think what I see, and again, I listen to Jack's show too, so this is speculative on my part, but I see him kind of really playing up the concept of we're a Bitcoin company, we're going to create some sort of Bitcoin business. It's going to be super profitable because of how profitable Tether is and how profitable Strike is. And so, somebody that's looking at investments, I look at that and I think, is that something I want to invest in? Which is basically a startup, a Bitcoin business startup. Sure, they have proven track records in other Bitcoin businesses, but what will they're not going to create a stable coin. They're not going to create a Bitcoin exchange because that's going to compete with their interests. So what other Bitcoin business is very profitable that they can create?
It's also
Big,
like 5 years late. It's like you're thinking about this now. It's like, oh, I suppose, maybe it's never too late, but it's like, I think MSCL has done so well because they're like, I'll do it. I'll see what happens. And they're just going, that's a good idea. But they waited 5 years. Like, I don't know. I just get skeptical of these people that are piggybacking now onto MSTR. Maybe it is a hidden gem, but once again, it's just a gem. Like, if they do decide to go, let's just absolutely dump this. And will that stock recover in 5, 10 years to what people are buying it at now? I don't know. Like, I don't really know how it works. But yeah, I thought I'd just add that. You can continue.
yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's really about execution, and we have no idea what they're executing on. You're taking a massive gamble with them. I think largely 21 is sort of like a public corporate entity for Maulers, Strike, SoftBank, and Tether. So they can funnel their own Bitcoin into it with Tether because they own so much, and they can try to leverage that in the public markets with attention, and basically other people's investment capital. I think it's really just like we want a corporate public arm of our businesses, and we'll just do this in this way. I don't know if that's a good investment for the average retail buyer, though. But personally, I bought a bunch of 21 and traded it. Like it was an unbelievable trading instrument because of how illiquid, or like how low float it was and still is, and how hyped it has been. So I traded it. I'm playing, I have a little bit of shares left, and it's all house money, and I've even taken out a bunch of house money because I bought and sold that thing, and I don't have much faith in it, to be honest, for the long term. But I'll let a few shares ride, essentially, is what I'm thinking about with 21 at this point.
Yeah, I did. I bought a little bit of it, and it like doubled or tripled or something. And I was like, oh, it's picking up traction. Like maybe they're getting confirmed today. And then like it's been plummeting ever since. Like I'm not a day trader. Like I just like holding things for years now. So, um, yeah, it's interesting to see where that all goes. What other companies compete? People that are just really trying to copy MSTR's strategy, but on a small scale. But I do like the whole doing it in Japan. Is really cool because that's kind of their only way in some cases to get Bitcoin. So a lot of people are buying it. So
Mhm.
those people that see that hole in the market, like the gap in the market, and actually take the shot, like it's quite brave. Um, so if Bitcoin wasn't to exist, would it be? What have you found to be, I guess, the closest to Bitcoin or the closest to a store of value in this journey? Because I feel like Bitcoin's allowed me to see what's wrong with money, so run from money. But in a world where Bitcoin doesn't exist, what are you holding? What's so similar to Bitcoin that you find kind of interesting in that sort of scenario? Just because that's something I constantly think about. If Bitcoin fails, at least it's taught me about a store of value. But what do I buy?
Other scarce assets, I guess, but there really isn't anything comparable to Bitcoin. That's what's so crazy. Like, and that's why, like, again, messing with these crypto coins is just so dumb, because it's like Bitcoin, as much as you can, say something else is better or whatever the hell, it just isn't. And the reason it's not is because Bitcoin has the best chance of being a fair hard money for the world, the base layer money. It has the best opportunity, it has the highest probability of that actually happening. And that is so valuable, because if it is the sound money, the store of value, it will absorb the value of all the other stores of value out there. So, as I said, scarce assets. So, gold, about 45% of gold's value is because of its use case in jewelry and electronics. So that means what 55% is monetary premium. It's because central banks hold it. It's because of its history as money, as a store of value. It's cost of production, its stock to flow ratio. All these things are really better in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's going to begin to absorb the store of value function from gold. Real estate as well. We both live in countries where real estate has been constantly told to us that you should buy a home, the houses always go up. The housing market is a complete bubble. It's so determined by demographics, by regulation, uh by supply and demand of that is, again, arbitrary, based on immigration policy, based on, again, demographics. All these things play into it so much that I worry, like, all these boomers have houses that are massive, and the generations that have come after them have not had the same sizes of families, so they don't require the same sizes of houses. So when these houses hit the market, not every house is the same, right? They're not fungible. Houses are not fungible, they're non-fungible, everyone is unique. So what happens when all these houses hit the market that don't have demand? They go down in value until somebody's willing to buy them. And so much of it is being propped up right now by investment firms, and the value of things are always on the margin, right? So if there's if there's just buyers and sellers and there's sort of an even amount, if there's a little more buyers, that's going to drive the price up, right? So uh, even though it accounts for a small percentage of the overall purchases, there is this investor class that is willing to pay more, come in and bid the price up, thinking that they're buying a business. They're not buying a residence. They're not buying the utility of a home. They're buying the cash flow of being able to rent it out and the store of value function of it increasing and the function of being able to leverage to the tits to be able to buy it, which is also an asset because you can get cheap leverage on homes because it's basically subsidized by the banks that can print free money. So these houses, like all of this stuff is so unstable. Like you start to look at these things, you start to think, what happens if the investor class looks at housing and says, you know what, the returns aren't here anymore. This is really risky. This is a lot of work. Let's just buy Bitcoin instead. Seems to be outperforming anyway. If we want leverage, we can find some leverage to buy Bitcoin with that. Let's replace real estate and the store of value function with Bitcoin. What happens then? The price of houses goes down. The bubble starts collapsing, right? And again, maybe nominally housing will continue to go up. Maybe it'll just go down priced in Bitcoin. But to me, there's a lot of risk in real estate. And I don't even know what the question was anymore. When I start talking about real estate, man, it's all consuming because it's like, to me, that's one of the knock-on effects of Bitcoin is stripping the store of value out of all these things that have a premium on them that have other utility. Like, wouldn't it be nice if instead of using less superior metals, we could use gold in more electronics, but instead you have to switch to using silver or something else because it's too expensive because there's a monetary premium. And that, who does that affect? I don't know. But with real estate, it's so obvious. Like, it affects you and I. It affects anybody wanting to buy a home, anybody wanting to, you know, just live like the sort of the dream life that we all aspire to. There's this monetary premium. We're having to pay more for something that we just use for its utility value. And that should only have its utility value. So I see it as a great unjust that there's a monetary premium on all sorts of things that shouldn't have it. And I think that's one of the knock-on effects or side effects of Bitcoin is stripping away that monetary premium and making the cost of living much less for everybody, even if they don't adopt Bitcoin.
Mm, yeah, real estate is really interesting. I just had like an Aussie guy on my show, Zane Truscott, and he is like, I'm not sure whether he's in his 50s, but let's just hope that's right. And he was actually saying, like, for advice for young people, avoid the housing market as much as you can right now. He said, the temptation for the reputation, the success, this idea that you have made it is all just an illusion. He's like, the reality is, like, over here in Australia, a very average home, something that's quite run down, 20, 30 years old, is still 500, 600, $700,000. The median house price is now $1 million in Australia. And it's like, so if I'm just going to buy the average, I'm going to get absolutely obliterated. Like, who is making that type of money? Like, an average salary here might be $100,000 and you're buying $1 million home. And it's like, how are you going to pull that much savings with the rate of mortgage? And it's constantly increasing. Like, the next 1 week, it's all right, 500 or 600, 700 a week. Then the next, it's 800. It's like, it actually changes that fast. And people that are budgeting for it, it's so unpredictable. Like, this housing market is just going up, but all these costs along the way, it's almost like it's already going down. Like, that's how I'm seeing it. And so I do not subscribe to the theory that it's just going down in Bitcoin terms. I genuinely think we'll start to see prices come down, even with the amount of printing, because I just think we're in such like almost a 2008 repeat. It's like 2008 global financial crisis, bail everyone out. All right, we'll try and be a bit better with our money. It's all good. Nah, let's do it again. Boom. Like, it's just like such a run up. How long is this sustainable? But an interesting conversation I was having yesterday was what happens to Bitcoin in a 2008 repeat. And I was sort of not even really, it wasn't even an argument, it was just discussion because we both hold Bitcoin. Just saying, Yeah, I think it would drop a lot, like with everything else, because people sell the first thing they can sell. And a lot of the times it can be Bitcoin because it's so liquid. And so, of course, we would see a drop. Like, I don't see it just holding steady because people are emotional and people are human. But imagine all the people that have it in cold storage, that are offline, that are locked in, that are like, I'm holding this on the side regardless of what happens, which is now increasing. You see those wallets that are holding for a long term, that's just going up, up, up. Those that are highly emotional retail investors that are in and out constantly, of course, they're going to get wiped out. And of course, it's going to cause a drop. But I just have this feel like, I guess it's just feeling, and this is why it's not financial advice or anything. It's just like I have so much more confidence in Bitcoin as a store of value in a scenario like that than I do with anything else. Everything else to me is such an illusionary bubble. And regardless of how much of market cap of Bitcoin is off the printed dollar, there's probably a significant percentage. But it's like that's the system we're in. But I almost feel as though it's time to leave the old system and join the new. And whether there's a correction in price or not, it doesn't really matter. It's like this is capital that you literally can take into self custody offline and prepare for something like a GFC repeat a lot better than real estate. Like your price of your house will just plummet. There's no chance you're going what I'm going to try and quickly find a buyer. Like in that scenario, no one's buying. Like no chance. And so I don't know. Like I just, what do you think? Like if 2008 has a repeat and it's like everyone realizes I can't even get money from the bank. My house is actually worth nothing. Houses trend to 50 grand, 100 grand a house again. Like that's what happened in America in 2008. Everything just became super cheap. Where do you see Bitcoin? Do you see what sort of drop? Let's just hypothetical. It's like I like to speculate. What sort of drop do you see, and is it something that survived to the next run? I guess.
It definitely survives. Bitcoin's never going to zero. I think a lot of people that have no so okay, so there's all sorts of people make a market, right? And with Bitcoin, there are people still for some reason that think it could go to zero, that own it. There's a lot of people now that own it that don't think it's going to go to zero. They think it's volatile. It could go down 80%. Like so, there's a broad spectrum of different types of people with different amounts of understanding. There's a lot of people, as you said, that are in cold storage. I think what's interesting about sort of a black swan event like 2008 or a liquidity crisis or anything like that, even what happened again, lockdown time. Bitcoin crashed like crazy and then it recovered really fast. And that's because of the function of its liquidity, of the market being so accessible. So if you have the ability to sell it, you can sell it. There's a buyer at some price. You can do that immediately. You can do that instantly. With housing, part of what keeps it stable to some degree is the inability to sell it, the illiquidity of the market. So the fact that you can't just immediately find a buyer for it, you have to put your house on the market, you have to figure out where you're moving, you have to pack all your stuff. It takes so much time. There's realtors, there's all these other fees. That actually slows down the collapse of that market, which is an interesting phenomenon. So if you look at that, um, basically, kind of what I'm saying is there's no ticker outside of your house that is showing the value of your house at any moment. So your house could go down in value, but you could just continue to own it. You could continue to, uh, pay the mortgage, pay the insurance, pay the maintenance, all this stuff. Um, but the value of it, if you put it on the market, could be substantially lower in an environment like that, of course. And then when it does go on the market, it affects all of the other real estate around it. Um, so that it's very regional. And then if anybody else needs to sell, and basically what happens and what causes these massive drawdowns is forced sellers, and a lot of times they're forced sellers because of leverage. And that's what 2008 was, right? It was all these people way over leveraged, the ninja loans and the 0% down, all this crazy stuff, right? Um, and then interest rates change, and something else blows up, and there's a contagion effect. But basically, what I'm saying here is Bitcoin would 100% drop in an environment like that. But the thing is, is Bitcoin was designed for an environment like that. It was built because of the 2008 financial crisis and because of the bailouts of the banks and the investment firms and the automotive companies and the bill that was fronted by the taxpayer and the money printer as well. And so that was completely unfair. And there was a massive public outcry in the form of Occupy because of that. And then there was the cypherpunk you know creation of Bitcoin as a response to that, and saying here is a monetary network that nobody can control. It is the interest rate, the issuance, all these things that are all variables in the regular regular monetary system are all fixed in code. Though there's no interest rate, but that was just a variable that I was explaining basically. And so Bitcoin is built for this. So if there's a massive drawdown, Bitcoin's going to get affected because it's so liquid, but it's perfectly built to actually exist outside of a failing monetary system. And if the housing goes, banking's going to suffer, and if banking suffers, the financial system suffers, the governments suffer, the nations suffer, everybody suffers. And the only thing that's not affected by any of that is Bitcoin. And that's what people talk about with one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, right? You talked about the cold storage hodlers. They it's people are denominating it in US dollars and Aussie dollars, Canadian dollars, whatever. But if you just look at your balance, if there's all of a sudden a black swan and the value of your Bitcoin denominated in dollars goes way down, you still look at your cold card and you say, I still have exactly the same amount of Bitcoin as I did yesterday. I'm fine, right? You still own the exact same amount of this asset that has fundamentally not changed. And I think people mistake volatility for risk. And really, it's a type of risk, but it's to be mitigated by position size and by time horizon of holding. And if you hold Bitcoin for any 4-year period, if you historically go back, you can buy it right at the top of any 4-year period. You're nominally higher in value in Bitcoin. So it's really about just holding it for long enough to see that value, that purchasing power increase compared to everything else around it.
Alrighty, man. Well, I love this conversation. I love speculating on a 2008 repeat. I think that's an interesting concept. I just wanted you to have a chance to plug in maybe your community, your channel, any projects you're pushing, like game that you've created that I find really cool, courses, maybe Maple Bitcoin, and then maybe just a little final message to wrap up things for young people saving and buying Bitcoin today.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You check out my channel. It's Bitcoin, not crypto on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Forrest Hodl. And yeah, I'm 1/3 of Maple Bitcoin, which is me, Rajat, and Jor. We do a live stream every week. We also have a school community, which is more of an exclusive thing. We do a live on there, but people can actually join with camera and video, camera and audio, and ask questions and stuff. So you can check that out. I also am the co-builder, founder of Sats Arcade, which is this play-to-earn platform where you can play these games that we built, and you can earn Sats. So you can earn some Bitcoin. And the concept of that is that you could send this platform to your normie friends and just say, hey, you can earn some free Bitcoin. And they'll be like, oh, sure, whatever. I'll play some games for some free Bitcoin. And throughout that, they're actually learning about what Bitcoin is. They're learning about the history of money. And it's sort of an onboarding platform where you're learning about Bitcoin. But by the end of it, when you actually understand Bitcoin to some degree, you also own some right off the bat. So you're sort of invested a little bit without having to actually spend any money. So that's the concept there. It's called satsarcade.app. We're just on web browser at this point, but future plans of all sorts of things with that. And yeah, just my advice to people, I never tell people to buy Bitcoin, but I tell them to study Bitcoin, because to me that is almost the same thing. And you have to have some sort of commitment. Again, the volatility risk is there in the short term. If you just bought Bitcoin, you have no idea what it is, and all of a sudden it goes down 10% in a day, you're like, whoa, what the hell? I'm getting rid of this thing. This thing sucks. Because you don't understand it. So I tell people to study it, because that's what worked for me. When I studied it, as I studied it, again, my stocks, my whatever, my REITs, everything just started being swapped into Bitcoin. The more I learned about it, the more conviction I grew with it, the more I understood it was going up forever, priced in dollars, because dollars are going down forever. They can always drop another 99% in value in real terms. So Bitcoin is the best instrument that I've found to capture the value of the decreasing value of fiat. So yeah, study Bitcoin. If you're already on Sats Ventures channel here, you're probably doing that already, and you can do that on my channels, and you can do that all over the internet. And get out there in the meet space too. Join a meetup, create a meetup, meet some Bitcoiners. You'll learn a lot in person from people, and you'll understand the social layer of Bitcoin, which is arguably the most important, I would say.
Well, thanks for coming on. I love this conversation, and we'll have to do it again in a few months. Cheers, Forrest.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.